Among the early members of the society were 6 men who had attended our predecessor, Liberty Hall Academy, or one of its earlier incarnations, and several vigorous advocates of the young school, including General Washington himself and the celebrated Revolutionary War hero, Light Horse Harry Lee, who would become the father of Robert E. Lee. Yet another advocate for the school was Major Alexander Stewart, who had donated 40 acres to Liberty Hall in 1776. He fought bravely during the Revolution and was captured at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse in North Carolina. At the same battle was his son, Archibald Stewart, an alumnus of another of our predecessors, Augusta Academy, who became president of the Phi Beta Kappa chapter at William and Mary, and who carried the society's seal into battle with him. In 1802, the Society of the Cincinnati ceded its treasury of approximately $25,000 to Washington College. That gift, as well as bequests from Washington and from Jockey John Robinson, constituted the school's entire endowment at the time. The gift from the Society of the Cincinnati continues to support both this convocation and an endowed chair in the mathematics department. With the Society's gift also came some stipulations that the university continues to honor. One was that the College Institute studies in fortification and gunnery. Sure enough, as those of you who have attended this convocation before may recall, such a course is still offered by the mathematics department. The course is called Military Engineering. It carries no credit and has no course number, but a recent course catalog indicates that, quote, for qualified students who may request it, a course in fortifications, gunnery, and ballistics will be offered, end quote. It is fitting that the Society of the Cincinnati's generosity to the university and its support, past and present, for our liberal arts mission are linked with today's celebration of our outstanding young scholars. We of Phi Beta Kappa continue to be deeply grateful to the Society of the Cincinnati. I will now call upon our chapter vice president, Ms. Emily Cook, to announce the names of those recently elected to membership in our society. Ms. Cook will also bring to your attention some noteworthy scholarly attainments of other students. Ms. Cook.
Last year, the Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa elected to membership as juniors 23 members of the class of 2017 and recognized them here in Lee Chapel. They are Mauricio Jose Bustamante, Alice Lane Cannon, Matthew Lewis Carl, Katie Clemens, Brooke Rose Donnelly, Joshua Michael Doomler, Elliot Amadian, Melina Lauren Knaba, John Wilson Miller II, Stephen Carrington Mitchell Jr., Christopher William Myers II, Ashley Ohms, Zoe Helen Ottaviani, Scott Valentine Phillips, Austin William Pyatt, Jacob Stewart Roberts, Zachary Santangelo, Christian Angel Sharman, Elizabeth Stanton, Paget Ayers Sutherland, Zachary Joseph Taylor, Jenny J. Wang, and Jamie Lane White. Several of those students who were elected as juniors last year missed the convocation, one of which is here today, so I'd like Paget Sutherland to stand and receive belated but well-deserved recognition for her achievements. Paget. And now for this year's initiates. Students, as I read your name, please come up on the stage and face the audience and remain on stage until all of your classmates have been recognized. Audience, please hold your applause until all new initiates are on stage. First, our initiates from the class of 2016. We elect a handful of members from the just graduated class based on their final grades. This year, we welcome 7 members from the class of 2016. And those are Davis Williamson Bateman, Jacob Matthew Berman, Kevin Bennett Ortiz, Mary Kathleen Sands, Mary Elizabeth Smith, David Stephen Zekin, Conan Yingyi Zhao. And from the class of 2017, we welcome Charles Rep Baker, Diana Boucher Banks, Olivia Kate Gilmore Brown, Daniel J. Claroni, John Mayer Crum, John Zietler Donnell, Ariana India Dial, Ellie Gorman, Dalton Lee Greenwood, Philip Scott Harmon, Conley Karlovic Hurst, Polina Kirishko, Laura Elizabeth Lavette, Sydney Pearson Lundquist, Patrick Alexander Ozark, Catherine Sarfert, Elizabeth Schmitz, Cole William Schott, Cody Allen Solomon, Sean Soman, Eleni Catherine Suzanne Timas, Anna Carolyn Todd, Garrett Van Summeren, Emily Allison Webb, Claire Elizabeth Wilkinson, and now members of the class of 2018. Their individual grade point averages place them on the top 5% of their junior class. Please welcome Gyllenhaal Johannes Beck, Alice Elizabeth Bradford, Thomas Sullivan Caldwell, Stephanie Rosalind Isabel Chung, Hayden Paul Combs, Raymond Emery Cox, Dana Elizabeth Dross, Luke Farley, Max Sander Garrett, Nicholas Kent George, Ralston Hartness, Lauren Klein Hoffman, Shlomo Honig, Tessa Horan, Maren Rebecca Lundgren, Rebecca Melkerson, Karishma Patel, Emily Elizabeth Persick, Ram Haresh Raval, Cassie Ann Scott, Mallory Stevenson, Yue Hermione Wang, Julia Marie Wilson, and Joseph Rolf Zoller. We also welcome Roger Bailey Jeans Jr., Professor Emeritus, as an honorary member today. Professor David Peterson will read a brief statement about why Professor Jeans receives this honor today. Please come forward, Professor Peterson and Professor Jeans.
Roger Bailey Jeans Jr., Professor of History at Washington and Lee University, 1974 to 2006. Our society is dedicated to the pursuit of liberal education and intellectual fellowship, and to the conviction that love of learning is the guide of life. Roger Jeans' career at Washington and Lee University amply exemplifies the ideal of learning as a guide for life. After graduating from Colby College and completing his doctorate at George Washington University, Roger joined Washington and Lee's History Department in 1974 and rose to hold the Elizabeth Lewis Otey Professorship of East Asian Studies until his retirement in 2006. At a time when faculty taught as many as 8 courses a year, Roger developed a repertoire of survey courses on Chinese and Japanese history, as well as upper-level offerings on World War II, the Chinese Revolution, Westerners in China, and occupied Japan. He served also as director of the East Asia Studies program from 1983 to 1989, and on a myriad of university committees, hosted numerous distinguished speakers and students from abroad, and built up Leyburn Library's collections in East Asian history. Roger has been active as a scholar even into retirement. He has presented over 40 conference papers, published over 20 articles, and even more reviews. He is the author of 2 monographs on modern Chinese history and has a 3rd volume ready for publication. He has likewise edited a volume of the Marshall Mission to China, 1945 to 1947, and co-edited 3 other volumes. He has held numerous committee positions in scholarly associations, served regularly as a grant reviewer and conference organizer, and was honored with the presidency of the Southeast Conference of the Association of Asian Studies in 1987 to 88. In recognition of his rich contributions to the advancement of East Asian studies in America and his exemplification of the scholar-teacher ideal so valued here at Washington and Lee, we are proud to induct Roger B. Jeans, Jr. as an honorary member of our Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa. Thank you.
Thank you. So please join me in a round of applause for all of our new initiates. And initiates, you may return to your seats. I also have the pleasure of announcing the winners of several other awards today. First is the Phi Beta Kappa J. Brown Gehring Award. We present it to the sophomore or sophomores who achieve the highest academic average during his or her first 4 terms at WNL. The award is named for a man who truly exemplifies Phi Beta Kappa at Washington and Lee, Professor J. Brown Gehring. Dr. Gehring, a chemistry professor at Washington and Lee for 38 years, served as secretary-treasurer for the Gamma of Virginia chapter of Phi Beta Kappa for 22 of those years. Dr. Gehring, if you are here, please stand. He is not here. Thank you, Professor Gehring. I would like the 2 recipients, only one is here currently, from the class of 2019 to come to the stage and receive our congratulations and their certificates. The 2 winners of this prize are Henry Carr Patrick III and Catherine Kaladi Osowski. Next is the Edward Lee Penny Prize. The Student Affairs Committee gives it to an undergraduate or undergraduates who, in the words of the prize, demonstrate extraordinary commitment both to personal scholarship and to the nurturing of intellectual life at Washington and Lee. I'd like this person to stand and receive our congratulations, and this person is new inductee Cassie Scott. We would also like to recognize several other recent fellowship winners, and I invite them to stand if they are here. Pasquale Pocky Toscano, who won the Rhodes Scholarship, which provides 2 years of study at Oxford. Colin Wallace, who won the Rotary 7570 Skelton Jones Scholarship. John Donnell, who won a Fulbright English teaching assistantship to Spain. Angel Vela de la Garza, who won a Davis Projects for Peace Fellowship. Sierra Noland and Tara Cooper both have won critical language scholarships. And Harrison Westgarth and Olivia Howell were both awarded study/research Fulbrights to Brazil. And now I return the podium to Professor Janet Ikeda, President of the Washington and Lee Chapter of Phi Beta Kappa.
I would like to share just a few observations with our newest members. Washington and Lee enjoys a national reputation for academic excellence. Assurance that this reputation will endure depends both on those who teach and on those who study here. For it is by our work's quality that the university will continue to be measured. You, the new members of Phi Beta Kappa, do well to understand the honor and responsibility that are now yours. It has been and will continue to be our privilege to know you and to instruct you. By your accomplishments, you have earned our gratitude and highest commendation, and you have clearly exhibited your desire to embrace and uphold the love of learning, open-minded inquiry, lively debate, and free flow of information that stem from the liberal arts tradition. I challenge you to keep these qualities in mind throughout your life as you represent Washington and Lee University around the country and the world. Be an ambassador of both Phi Beta Kappa and Washington and Lee by encouraging others to engage in that open-minded inquiry that is the hallmark of a liberal arts education. I now have the distinct pleasure of introducing our convocation speaker. William Tsutsui, Bill Tsutsui, is president and professor of history at Hendrix College. Before joining Hendrix College as its 11th president, he served as dean of Dedman College of Humanities and Sciences at Southern Methodist University from 2010 to 2014. Prior to joining SMU, President Tsutsui spent 17 years at the University of Kansas, where he served as acting director of Kansas's Center for East Asian Studies, chair of the Department of History, and associate dean for international studies in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. He holds degrees from Harvard, Oxford, and Princeton universities. He is a member of Phi Beta Kappa, and I might add, a proud Texan. President Tsutsui seems to exemplify the Phi Beta Kappa motto, "Love of learning is the guide of life." He is an award-winning classroom teacher and is the author or editor of 8 books, as well as numerous articles on modern Japanese history. His teaching and research focus on the business, environment, and cultural history of 20th-century Japan. His publications range from manufacturing ideology, scientific management in 20th-century Japan, to another great favorite in the field, Godzilla on My Mind, 50 Years of the King of Monsters. You must ask him about his presidential inauguration celebration at Hendrix, which took social media by storm. This past week, while at a conference in Toronto, I ran into President Tsutsui's Japanese teacher from his undergraduate or early graduate school years. She remembers him fondly and especially recalls how his booming laughter animated the entire language classroom. And students, if you think that we forget those little assignments you turn in, well, think again. Even today, Professor Tabuse, his Japanese teacher, remembers well an unforgettable essay in Japanese that President Tsutsui wrote with the title, I'll give you the English translation, "You Are What You Wear." So students, when you become a well-known leader in your field, as many of you surely will, we will be left with those precious memories of "we knew you back when." Now I will turn the podium over to President Tsutsui for his talk, "The Liberal Arts in an Age of Extremes." Please join me in welcoming President Tsutsui to Washington and Lee.
Well, thanks so much, Janet, for that very kind introduction and for the invitation to address this gathering today. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here in this historic place for this memorable occasion. In my current job, I get a lot of opportunities to speak at events called convocations. I think that just this academic year at Hendrix, I convoked our community 4 times. But this convocation is something truly special for me and, more importantly, for you. Congratulations to all the initiates today. Meeting the standards of Phi Beta Kappa is a big deal, and it's a lot to live up to. From now on, through your lives and careers, when people hear you were Phi Beta Kappa, they are going to expect you to be pretty darned smart. Even smarter than the run-of-the-mill Washington and Lee graduate. So be prepared to deliver on the high expectations that come from having the letters P, B, K, W, and L on your resumes. Now, since we are, after all, here at Washington and Lee, one of America's very top liberal arts institutions, and since Phi Beta Kappa is the world's premier liberal arts honor society, and since I am the president of a liberal arts college and spend the better part of my life extolling the values of a liberal education to 17-year-old applicants, deep-pocketed, misty-eyed alums, and a never-ending stream of lunching Rotarians, Kiwanians, optimists, Lions, and other civic worthies, it is probably inevitable that I should speak with you this afternoon about the liberal arts. It is also pretty much inevitable, in the particular historical moment in which we all live, that I start off my comments with a nod to the world of politics. I don't know about you all, but for me, even a full 4 months after Election Day, I still have the slogans, headlines, catchphrases, sound bites, tweets, and memes of the last presidential campaign firmly stuck in my head, like an insidious earworm. In the campaign of 2016, Marco Rubio seems to have been the candidate most inclined to use the liberal arts as a punching bag while out on the stump. Senator Rubio's remarks on the slim job market for Greek philosophers and the relative social value of welders as opposed to said philosophers were widely reported and incited firestorms of comments in places like the Chronicle of Higher Education. But the statement by the junior senator from Florida, who, interestingly enough, was a former one-and-done student at a now-defunct Missouri liberal arts institution, Tarkio College, the statement that most caught my attention was a comment made while discussing the Black Lives Matter movement. Life, Mr. Rubio declared, is not a liberal arts college. Now, as much as I would like to be offended by this line, as I suspect offense was intended, I have to admit that the senator was right. Liberal arts colleges are not microcosms of some larger real world, nor are they unproblematic templates for social interactions or political discourse or economic relationships in life beyond the stereotypically ivy-covered walls of our schools. Except for a vanishingly small proportion of the population employed in the academy, liberal arts colleges with their unrepresentative demographics, generally civil public spheres, and endowment-fueled atmospheres of never-Neverland economics are, it seems to me, not life as lived by our fellow Americans. And yet, the paramount goal of our institutions is preparing our students for life, whatever you may take that to mean, from the narrowest sense of vocational readiness to the most sweeping conceptions of citizenship and humanity. Where liberal education seems to be striking out right now is in persuading a good part of the American public that we are doing our job in equipping young people for the challenges of life, career, and the real world. After the election, as before, we find ourselves in a time of acute concern about the state of the liberal arts and increased scrutiny of the place of liberal education in American colleges and universities. What good are the liberal arts? What am I going to do with that art history or anthropology degree? What benefit does research in English literature or Kantian philosophy or teaching particle physics or the Russian language have for contemporary society? All of us here are only too familiar, I'm sure, with the rap on the liberal arts. The liberal arts, it is said, are soft and not real world. Stately Gothic quadrangles are a haven for left-wing, pampered, self-regarding ivory tower academics. The impracticality of the liberal arts, which is in fact their defining principle, appears indefensible in an age of technological primacy, pervasive uncertainty, and the slow demise of the American dream. And liberal arts colleges, so many Americans seem to believe, have become hermetically sealed snow globes, self-contained worlds of politically correct purity, inhabited by precious snowflakes of students and sanctimonious radicals on the faculty, obsessed with the politics of bathrooms, Halloween costumes, and bad sushi, insulated from the down and dirty realities of skills, jobs, and making ends meet. I suspect that most of us in this room are also familiar with the statistics widely bandied about, which document the long downward trajectory of the liberal arts in American higher education. As countless commentators have argued, it increasingly appears that the liberal arts were the phenomenon of a historical moment, a time of wealth and growth and faith in a well-rounded education that flourished after World War II, but whose promise became increasingly tarnished from the 1970s on. In 1971, for example, English departments awarded more than 64,000 bachelor's degrees. By 2001, while the number of bachelor's degrees awarded in all fields was up 50%, the number of degrees in English was down, both in absolute numbers to just over 50,000, and as a percentage of all degrees, from 7.6% to only 4%. Mathematics experienced an even sharper drop, and most traditional liberal arts disciplines have seen no or only a very slight increase in the number of degrees awarded since 1970. Meanwhile, student interest exploded in pre-professional subjects, business above all, but also computer science, communications, and a category which barely existed in the 1970s, parks, recreation, leisure, and fitness studies. Even agriculture has shown far more robust growth in undergraduate majors over the past 40 years than most of the mainstream liberal arts fields. I did not think to check before today on the numbers on ballistics and gunnery majors, but I'm sure they're doing better than English too. In any case, students seem to be voting with their feet, and they've been walking in the same direction for a couple generations, away from the liberal arts and toward the professional schools. Such unassailable facts, as well as the accelerating drumbeat of critical media coverage, has stirred the defenders of the liberal arts into a frenzy. Although there is a profusion of heartfelt arguments supporting liberal education now in circulation, from the hard-nosed to the almost metaphysical, I sense we can categorize these varied arguments into two main approaches. First is what I would call the functionalist or practical rationale for the liberal arts. And second is what we could label the idealistic or intrinsic value rationale for liberal education in America. I suspect that everyone in this room is familiar with these contentions, justifications, and entreaties, and you all, like me, may well rally them on a daily basis when talking with prospective students, parents, or folks in line down at Kroger's. But let me just run them by you briefly now. The practical case for the liberal arts is usually the first arrow out of the quiver for advisors, humanities professors, and students asked skeptically about that major in history. Look at any Fortune 500 board of directors, and you are likely to find a whole slew of liberal arts graduates. The liberal arts prepare you not just for one job, as more narrow professional or vocational training might, but for a wide range of jobs that need widely transferable skills like reading, writing, research, analysis, synthesis, and creativity. In an age when the rigid career trajectories of the past have given way to flexible and unpredictable career paths and many job changes over the course of a lifetime, the liberal arts are the best possible educational base. And finally, today, nations like China, Singapore, and India are trying to emulate the liberal arts from America in order to stir creativity in their undergraduates. Surely, if countries with such robust economies and so many kids excelling in STEM fields are also interested in the humanities and social sciences, then surely there must be something good about them after all. The idealistic case for the liberal arts goes in a very different direction, but can be distilled down to a simple message. To wit, a broad liberal education, free from the narrowing blinders of vocationalism, prepares individuals to lead full, open-minded, civically engaged, rewarding, humane, and reflective lives. This more ethereal rationalization has long been a harder sell in pragmatically minded America, but that has not stopped legions of academic defenders of liberal education from jumping up on their soapboxes and ranting, as we in the humanities are particularly prone to do, on the future of higher education. This cottage industry of learned pundits on the liberal arts has specialized in finger wagging, in scolding the cold and calculating real world for not adequately appreciating how valuable the academy and particularly the self-consciously impractical realm of liberal education can truly be. One prominent finger wagger is Martha Nussbaum of the University of Chicago, who seems like a liberal arts college in her own right, with faculty appointments in philosophy, law, ethics, divinity, human rights, South Asian studies, classics, and political science. Whew. According to Nussbaum, it all comes down to democracy. Using more words and longer words than I do, Nussbaum has argued that an increasingly pre-professional focus in American education is draining our society of the capacities for critical thinking, creativity, reflection, and empathy, all of which she judges as essential for a healthy, progressive democracy. Columbia English professor Andrew Delbanco came to much the same conclusion in his smart, pithily titled book, College, published in 2012. A college, he concludes, quote, should not be a haven from worldly contention, but a place where young people fight out among and within themselves the contending ideas of a meaningful life. We owe it to posterity to preserve and protect this institution. Democracy depends on it. Or, as Bro Adams, chair of the National Endowment for the Humanities and a former liberal arts college president, put it just last week, the humanities and liberal education, quote, are at the very heart of our ability to sustain democracy. But for all the earnest hand-wringing over the demise of the liberal arts, neither the functionalist nor the idealistic arguments have proven terribly convincing to the American public. The practical case for liberal education foundered after the Great Recession of 2008, as unemployment among recent college graduates skyrocketed, droves of liberal arts majors headed home to move back in with mom and dad, and survey after survey showed that the starting salaries for grads with degrees in the humanities and social sciences lagged behind those with qualifications from professional schools. Regrettably, the idealistic defense of the liberal arts has gotten even less traction in recent years in the court of American public opinion. Even a true believer like myself cannot help feeling that most of the academic champions of liberal education end up sounding hopelessly spoiled, pampered, privileged, and elitist. The suggestion that only those of us with good liberal arts degrees are prepared to live rich, fulfilling lives and be stout guardians of democracy is, it seems to me, condescending, pure, and simple. In my America, our America, there seems to be no doubt that a high school dropout can lead as rewarding a life as an Amherst grad, or that democracy is a universal aspiration and opportunity, even in places as devoid of liberal arts colleges as Afghanistan or Wyoming. And while UCLA German professor John McCumber made a trenchant case in the Chronicle last year for the importance of the academic humanities in creating a more humane world, I suspect most of our fellow Americans would put their faith in family or church rather than a college seminar in philosophy or literary studies as the breeding ground of human goodness. I might even go one step further in the wake of the last election in problematizing that notion so entrenched among academic commentators that the liberal arts are the natural spring from which democracy flows. It strikes me that in the historical moment in which we all live, I increasingly struggle to make the case that the liberal arts are essential to the vitality of American democracy. And I am haunted by the nagging worry that today it is not narrow vocationalism or anti-intellectual philistinism which poses the greatest challenge to traditional liberal education, but it is instead the reality of American democracy itself, at least as practiced in the early 21st century, that is most insistently calling into question the value of the liberal arts. The idea that the liberal arts are indispensable in producing democratic citizens and maintaining a democratic political system harkens back to an age when the American public sphere was only open to an educated few, schooled in a time-honored civic and civil language of political discourse. An age when earning the privilege to speak in the democratic agora of American life meant having a suitably broad liberal education. It harkens back to some distant golden age for the liberal arts, prior to the 1970s and the modern tsunami of pre-professional education. The same era, soberingly enough, that those who chant "Make America Great Again" seem to nostalgically yearn for. This elitist strain in the liberal arts goes right back to their origins in ancient Greece, when training in rhetoric and philosophy were considered essential for all free men of Athens. Emphasis on free as opposed to slave, and men as opposed to women. Today, of course, one does not need a particular vocabulary or a good liberal arts BA to engage in our society's great debates. All it needs, one seems, are an opinion, a Twitter account, and 2 thumbs. Whether or not one bemoans or celebrates this populist turn in American political culture and in technology, it is hard to deny that the liberal arts and the more dignified, if arguably patrician democracy they once supported have increasingly been drowned out in the raucous, riotous, polarized, and fragmented free-for-all of the American public sphere today. So what are we to do? Those of us who are convinced of the importance of liberal education, those of us trained in the best traditions of the liberal arts, those of us who serve and lead and love American liberal arts colleges. We have struggled mightily for decades to convince the larger world of the significance of how we chose to be educated, what we do in great institutions like this one, and why it all matters. What then of the present moment, when our public discourse is so toxic, our society so polarized, our culture so splintered, our collective ability and even our collective will to find common ground apparently so frayed? What of the liberal arts in such an age of extremes? And if we can bear to think about it, what of the future, when popular indifference towards liberal education may well transition to a more active hostility born of heightened perceptions of privilege and political extremism and irrelevance? I would suggest that the biggest threat to the liberal arts in the years ahead is that those of us who care so deeply reconcile ourselves to the widely assumed marginalization of liberal education in a rapidly changing ecosystem of higher ed and a cacophonous public sphere. We cannot accept irrelevance for the liberal arts or make irrelevance a self-fulfilling prophecy by becoming too detached, too inward-looking, too self-referential in a time of profound uncertainty, instability, and anxiety. Liberal education, in other words, cannot allow itself to become the museum piece or the fossil or the snow globe, which so many already dismiss us as. We must struggle not to withdraw even further from the world on our cozy, contented campuses, shutting out voices that upset us, ideas that challenge us, and realities at odds with our values and ideals. Now more than ever, liberal education and liberal arts colleges must be in the world and of the world, not adrift in nostalgic reveries or utopian dreams or contented isolation. I would also suggest at this particular historical juncture that what America needs more desperately than anything else is a new common language of civic discourse, a shared means of talking and listening to each other that can unite rather than atomize, restore civility, encourage mutual respect, and breach the echo chambers into which we have almost all retreated. Those of us immersed in the liberal arts could and should take a leading role in crafting this new collective grammar of American citizenship. But we will fail in this endeavor if we insist that our time-honored language of democracy is the language of democracy, or that liberal education is the exclusive path to earning a public voice. We must be prepared to engage open-mindedly and respectfully with individuals and groups that many of us seldom encounter, from geographies and demographics and political subcultures far different from our own, in framing a new democratic lingua franca. And in this process, we will also need to let go of some of our deeply held intellectual conceits. While we should never lose our suspicion of fake news and alternative facts, we should not cavalierly dismiss opinions rendered in 140 characters as trivial, ephemeral, or ill-conceived. Likewise, even though the president has been widely ridiculed for vocabulary and grammar that fall short of middle school standards, we should remember, before we ourselves write or speak, that sophisticated ideas can be presented in simple terms. And for a civic language to be truly inclusive, truly democratic, it must be broadly accessible. Finally, I would suggest that those of us touched by the liberal arts need to recognize that for all the value of conversations, of speaking and hearing, of affirming and being affirmed, of sharing on an individual basis and in a renewed public sphere, We as a society need to go beyond talk to address directly the ills that so obviously ail us. In the end, discussions, no matter how frank and substantive and civil, will not solve America's problems any more than decades of flowery rhetoric and countless essays in the Chronicle of Higher Ed have restored the liberal arts to the core of American public life. Good intentions must be followed by meaningful conversations, which in turn must be followed by appropriate actions at the personal, the institutional, the community, and eventually the national level. If liberal arts colleges and the generations of students who have benefited from them can stay engaged through difficult times, help articulate a new idiom for democratic discourse, and in the process facilitate very real change in awareness, expectations, and behavior, process, policy, and outcomes, then the worth of those ideals of liberal education we also cherish will again be made manifest. As I see it, the fate of the liberal arts is in our hands, as is the future of the ambitious, impetuous, unlikely, unpredictable, confounding national experiment that is America, and the democracy we treasure but all too often take for granted. If Phi Beta Kappa graduates of Washington and Lee can't figure all of this out, then woe is America and woe is the world. I, at least, have faith in you and in us, in the power of the liberal arts and in the enduring genius of this nation to bring us all a future far greater than any past we may longingly remember, nostalgically embroider, or wishfully imagine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Tsutsui. We are so pleased that you were able to be with here, that you were able to be with us here today. And I want to say congratulations to the new initiates and thank you, everyone, for helping us honor them today. We invite everyone to join us for a reception and I guess some meaningful conversations in the Center for Global Learning's atrium, located up here on the hill here, immediate following this convocation. And I'd like to declare that we are now concluded. Thank you.